All right, I want to switch gears now and talk about an issue that a few of you, our viewers, have been asking us to shed some light on. It's an issue that not many news organizations are talking about at all, and this time it involves the Fort Calhoun Nuclear Plant in Nebraska. About 2 weeks ago, there was a fire inside the plant that at the time knocked out the cooling system in certain parts. Officials there say it was restored within about 90 minutes, but now there's cause for new concern. Take a look. This is the rising Missouri River. It has flooded the area, and experts, including the power company, says that the high volumes of water could pose a threat to the electric system. There has been an ongoing no-fly zone here as well, but officials say it has nothing to do with potential radiation that could be being released from the plant. In fact, they say everything at the plant is just fine. Now, this situation may not be the same at what we've been seeing unfolding at the Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan, but you'll remember there as well several attempts by the government and officials to downplay the threat, to say everything was going to be fine, which we now know just wasn't true. So the point is, we should talk about it. There is reason enough to be suspicious. Joining me now is Tyson Slocum, director of the Public Citizens Energy Program. And Tyson, let's talk about this. What we're seeing in Fort Calhoun, the flooding around the nuclear plant, how much of a danger does this pose?
Well, it clearly poses a risk because the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is the agency that regulates all 104 nuclear power plants in the United States, raised the level of concern level for this plant to almost to a critical level. So it's clear that regulators in Washington, D.C. are concerned enough to raise the level of concern. But the bottom line here is that the lack of public information about our nuclear power plants, particularly after September 11, 2001, it was designed to keep critical information about vulnerable energy infrastructure like nuclear power plants away from terrorism. But what it's done is keep this critical information away from us so that we, the public, lawmakers, and journalists don't have quick, easy, independent access to important information about the operations and concerns about these plants. And so part of the problem with this situation has been the lack of clarity in some of the public statements by the operator of the nuclear power plant and by federal officials. And so getting more independent access, I think, is going to be critical.
But we do have some new information. In fact, a report just released today by the Associated Press, it was the culmination of a year-long investigation, found that there is a pretty tight, a comfortably close relationship, in my book, between the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and a lot of these power companies and the nuclear energy field in the United States. Basically, what this showed, this report, it was a very in-depth report. It showed that when you have things like, leaky valves, clogged up pipes, leaking radiation, instead of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission saying, all right, we need to figure out how to fix this, they say, you know what? The rules and regulations, they were just too conservative before, so let's loosen them, make them a little more lax. This, to me, is frightening.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Public Citizen has raised these concerns along with some members of Congress, like Representative Ed Markey, who's on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. He's been trying to get more information about the lack of toughness by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission on the domestic nuclear industry, particularly in light of what's happened in Japan. Now, in October, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission actually cited this Nebraska power plant for not having adequate safety and security measures to deal with flooding from the Missouri River. And they put the nuclear power plant on watch, on notice, essentially. The plant has allegedly come into compliance with those findings, but the fact is that the rising floodwaters do pose a risk. And from a bigger picture scenario here, it does raise the issue of whether or not nuclear power is viable going forward. There are a number of risks, and the Obama administration has committed significant taxpayer resources to build a new generation of nuclear power plants. And the question is this an affordable route? Are there more cost-effective, less risky alternatives like renewable energy and energy efficiency that might be able to meet our energy needs going forward.
You talk about this new generation of building new plants. I think it's really interesting. And tell me if I'm oversimplifying this too much. But these plants, most of these plants, were built back in the 60s. And they were built being able to last 40 years, but under the idea that most of them would probably be upgraded, renovated, or totally remodeled long before 40 years. Well, now it's been more than 50 years, and a lot of them continue to get their permits renewed. So this is what I think. You know, you have a car, and you have a bad part on the car. You either get it replaced, or you get a new car. That's just not happening here.
That's right. And this particular plant that's threatened by the floodwaters in Nebraska, it was built in 1973. And you're absolutely right. Your point that these are very complex systems. There's a number of critical components, and as those components age, the risks get higher and higher. And so the question is, from a safety and security standpoint, does it make sense to start to phase out these aging reactors? And the price tag for new reactors is now $10 billion or more. And the question to American taxpayers should be, should we subsidize these, or should we think about some of the emerging technologies like wind and solar and energy efficiency that present far less risk, but arguably greater return for the public?
And you have officials coming out here and saying this. You even have leaders of major countries like Germany coming out and saying this. But the fact is, that doesn't seem very likely in the United States for various reasons, between the different lobbying groups, between the power of the nuclear industry. What needs to happen? Does Fukushima need to happen here? What needs to happen in order to sort of change the entire tide of thinking here in this country?
Well, I definitely don't want a nuclear accident in the United States or anywhere else. And so I hope that it doesn't take an accident for us to recognize the huge risks and costs associated with nuclear power. I think it's evident just looking at the situation. We don't have a solution for the high-level radioactive waste. It's true that this Calhoun reactor, the waste is stored in dry casks that don't need as much water as the plants did in Japan. But the fact is that when we've got cost-effective alternatives like wind and solar available, when we have an optimized energy efficiency, why are we continuing to pursue expensive and risky nuclear power?
Certainly an important question. Tyson Slocum, Director of Public Citizens Energy Program.